Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hot Seat, a wireless design and development interview series where we talk about the latest wireless technologies, components, and design issues for the wireless design engineering community. Today we are speaking with Rachel Obstler, the Senior Director for Product Marketing at Keynote Systems. Rachel has over 15 years in the mobile industry with experience working for companies ranging in size from startups to multinational corporations. She was recently the Vice President for Product Management at DeviceAnywhere before it was acquired by Keynote. Rachel has also managed the wireless data quality products at Telephia, which is now part of Nielsen, and she also has the experience managing the products of various wireless technology companies, including Metawave Communication and Enuvis. Rachel began her mobile career at Lucent Technologies, where she managed and launched a billion-dollar product line of CMDA base stations. She holds a bachelor's degree in management science from MIT and a master's of business administration from Stanford University. Good afternoon, Rachel. I would like to first welcome you to the Hot Seat, and I was hoping we could start the conversation off by discussing the key issues and concerns companies have when developing mobile applications for employees and consumers focusing on mobile quality. When it comes to mobile quality, what are the key issues and concerns companies have when developing mobile applications for employees and consumers?
It's almost exactly what you would expect from a desktop application. So the same way that you have to worry about having good quality, good performance, is the same thing in the mobile world. And it's kind of interesting because I think that's changed a lot in about the last year. It used to be that when people got on mobile, you kind of expected it to be slower, you expected it to maybe be a little buggy, and now people are not really expecting that anymore. They're expecting it to work. So, the same things that you have to do when you put out a desktop app, which include, testing functionality, testing performance, testing usability, making sure it's, usable. They're really the same things you have to do for mobile. Now there's a whole realm of different things you also have to do for mobile, and that's kind of the second piece. So you have to worry about all the different devices out there. You have to make sure that whatever it is that you're offering looks right across the different hardware, works across the different software versions. It has to be able to respond appropriately if you lose signal, kind of a new thing with mobile. So there are a bunch of things that you do have to think about that are different for mobile than desktop applications as well. I mean, another good one I almost forgot is a touchscreen. It's a completely different paradigm. You're interacting with the device in a very different way, and so the application has to be able to know, okay, someone's touching it or someone's actually using the keyboard, and be able to respond appropriately based on the device.
And then, what are some best practices to ensure ROI when developing mobile applications for employees and consumers?
I think I'm a little biased since I work at Keynote, but being at Keynote, we always talk about performance and quality. And so these things are just really important. Again, it's a similar story to a desktop application. I saw an interesting stat from a company called eConsultancy that said 16% of people will not try a mobile app more than twice. So basically, only 16% of people would try it more than twice. So that means that the other 84%, if it doesn't work twice, they're done with it. They're moving on. So basically what that means is your app has to work, and if you want to make sure that you have good ROI, you want to make sure that you test it appropriately. I mean, it's kind of the same story. And the other piece of this too is that you can't just take a desktop application and throw it on a phone as is. You often have to optimize it for mobile.
You mentioned that you have to make sure that you test it appropriately. Can you maybe provide some example of how you test for that sort of thing?
One thing about mobile devices is that you can test a lot on development tools, you can test on emulators, but that's typically not enough. And so you actually have to make sure you test on your target devices. And maybe not all of them. There's hundreds of devices out in the market, but probably a good sampling of the devices. You have to make sure that you test on them because the emulator won't take you all the way. It won't get you to all the differences that you can really see with the different pieces of hardware out there and software.
And then, what are the biggest challenges facing companies that are developing mobile applications today, and what are some of the solutions available to overcome those challenges?
Back to testing again, is interesting. I was talking to a customer and they said they had done an internal analysis of the impacts to different groups within the company when they start supporting mobile, and the biggest impact was to the QA group. And the reason is because they need entirely different tools. I mean, they need something that allows them to test on real devices, like real mobile phones, real tablets. And also because there are so many devices out there, a lot of device diversity, that means that you're kind of adding an order of magnitude of how much testing you need to do. You need to test your application across a lot more different platforms than you do in the desktop world. So things you can do about it, it's really important to have a platform that allows you to test on real devices. QA groups are not, all in one place. You have people in India, you have people all around the world, people work remotely, and so having to have devices sitting at everyone's desk is just not very supportable. So you have to be able to have a remote device access platform. And then beyond that, you really need to look at automation. Because there's so much more testing and so many more platforms you need to cover, the extent to which you can do automation so that you don't really extend your testing cycles is very important.
And then, can you explain what hybrid apps are and why a company would choose to deploy them?
A hybrid app is an application that's essentially a native app. So native means it runs natively on the device. So it's an iOS app versus an Android app. But a hybrid app also has some web content in it. And a hybrid app can range. There's all different types of hybrid apps. So a hybrid app could almost entirely be a web app just wrapped in a native shell. Or it could mostly be a native application, really developed natively, but it has some web content in it. So, an example could be an eBay application that is mostly a native app, but that when you search for something, the results you get is like a web list, and rendered in the browser. And so I think the second part was, why would you use one? So let me start with why you would use a native app as opposed to just a website. So a native app is definitely optimized to work on that OS. So it's going to have better performance. Usually you're going to have better options around UI controls. You have better local storage if you want to store things, if your application tends to need a lot of memory. So there's a bunch of reasons why you'd use a native app. Now, the advantage of websites is that you can develop it once and it works across any device. So the reason why you'd use a hybrid app often is because you want to optimize performance, but at the same time you want to take advantage of some elements that you already have in the web that you don't have to redevelop.
And then, what are some of the trends that mobile developers need to be aware of, and how do they relate to ROI and mobile quality?
Probably on the mobile web side, we see a lot of companies moving to using responsive design. So responsive design is essentially, it means that you really think about all of your target devices at the beginning when you're designing your site. So instead of, a lot of people have a website and then they say, oh no, now I need to mobile optimize it. So they end up almost having to redesign their website because it wasn't thought about in terms of a mobile device when it was first designed. So responsive design means you do it in a very modular way. So you're creating one site, but then it renders differently depending on which device it's ultimately going to. And what that means is it's just more efficient to think about everything up front. And that's kind of the mobile first that people think about sometimes. But really think about all of your end devices up front, and instead of designing something, then having to rework it, and then your branding is less consistent.
And for my last question, what are your predictions for future developments in the mobile industry, and where does Keynote Systems fit into that picture?
One thing we see when we talk to our customers is hybrid apps are very big. So, it really is the benefit of, really optimizing for your customers, We see, I think in the news in the last year or so, you see big companies like Facebook and LinkedIn that were going fully web, coming back to do more hybrid or to do more native stuff. So we really see a lot of our customers doing native apps, but they tend to be hybrid apps, really. So again, they're trying to take advantage of the web content that they can, reuse where they can, but still optimize performance. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. Right now it still kind of is a two-horse race between iOS and Android, but I do see Windows Mobile. I think they have a chance. I think that Windows Phone will make some inroads, and so I think it may turn into more of a three-horse race eventually, especially kind of, in the enterprise world. In terms of how Keynote fits in, so we do have a platform that allows you to test on real devices, test from wherever you're located. So basically over the internet, you can access real devices, and you can also automate those tests. And we support any platform, and we support native, hybrid, and web. So regardless really of what ends up being done and developed in the future, we have products that allow people to make their testing process much more efficient so they can improve their ROI and get the product out the door.
I would like to thank you, Rachel, for joining us to discuss the importance focusing on mobile quality and best practices to ensure ROI when developing mobile for enterprise and consumer applications. I'm Megan Zimma, and I'll see you guys next time in the hot seat.